The cargo freighter Stellar Wanderer drifted through the asteroid field of the Kepler 442 system, its hull scarred from countless journeys across the galaxy. Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge, watching the navigation display as her ship approached the mining station Helios 7. Beside her feet lay Max, a golden retriever whose presence on the ship had raised eyebrows at every port they'd visited in the past 3 years. "Still don't understand why you keep that creature aboard," muttered Vextar, the Zilithian first officer. His 4 arms moved with practiced efficiency across the control panels, but his compound eyes kept darting toward the dog with obvious distaste. "It serves no functional purpose." Sarah scratched behind Max's ears, earning a contented sigh from the animal. "He's family, Vex. Something your species might not understand, but humans form bonds that go beyond utility." The bridge fell silent except for the soft humming of the ship's systems. The crew of 8 included 3 humans, 2 Zilithians, 1 Korthak engineer, 1 Tentari communications officer, and a Vrex pilot. They'd worked together for 2 years, but Sarah often felt the cultural divide between humans and the rest of the galaxy's species. "Approaching Helios 7, announced Zikta, the Vrex pilot. Her reptilian features remained expressionless as she guided the ship toward the docking bay. "Station Control is requesting standard cargo manifest and crew roster." "Send it over," Sarah replied, then activated the ship-wide comm. "All hands, prepare for docking. We'll be here for 48 hours for repairs and resupply. Standard shore leave protocols apply." As the Stellar Wanderer settled into its berth, Sarah gathered the necessary paperwork for the station authorities. Helios 7 was a neutral trading post operated by the Galactic Commerce Guild and frequented by dozens of species. It was supposed to be safe territory, governed by strict neutrality laws. The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss, and Station Inspector Cormesh stepped aboard. The tall, crystalline being's body refracted the ship's lighting into prismatic rainbows as he moved. Behind him followed 2 enforcement officers, a heavily muscled Brutic and a sleek, cybernetically enhanced Nexary. "Captain Chun," Cormesh's voice resonated like wind chimes. "Welcome to Helios 7. I trust your journey was uneventful." "Smooth sailing," Sarah replied, offering the data pad containing their manifest. "We're hauling rare earth metals to the Centauri colonies and picking up agricultural supplies for the return trip." Cormesh's crystalline fingers danced over the data pad, cross-referencing their cargo with galactic trade databases. Everything appeared to be in order until Max wandered onto the bridge, tail wagging as he investigated the newcomers. The Brutic officer, Grakton, took an immediate step back, his hand moving to the neural disruptor at his side. "What is that creature? It's not listed in your crew manifest." "That's Max," Sarah said calmly. "He's a dog, a companion animal from Earth. He's been with me since before I left the Sol system." "Animals are prohibited on Helios 7, the Nexary officer stated, her mechanical voice devoid of emotion. "Galactic Health Protocol 847 clearly states that unregistered biological entities pose contamination risks." Sarah felt her jaw tighten. "He's been cleared by health authorities on 17 different systems. I have all his medical records and vaccination certificates. Max poses no threat to anyone." Nevertheless, Cormesh interjected, "Station regulations must be followed. The animal will need to be quarantined in our biological containment facility until your departure." "Absolutely not." Sarah stepped protectively in front of Max. "He stays with me. We've never had any problems before." The tension on the bridge was palpable. Vextar and the other crew members watched nervously as the situation escalated. Grakton's hand remained near his weapon, while the Nexary officer began scanning Max with a handheld device. "Captain," Cormesh said, his tone becoming more authoritative, "you have 2 choices. Comply with our regulations or leave immediately. Helios 7 operates under strict biosecurity protocols." Sarah weighed her options. They desperately needed the repairs to their hyperdrive motivator, and The nearest alternative station was 3 weeks away. But the thought of leaving Max in some sterile quarantine facility made her stomach turn. How long would the quarantine last? She asked reluctantly. 72 hours minimum for initial biological assessment, the Nexary replied. Potentially longer if any anomalies are detected. That's unacceptable. We're scheduled to depart in 48 hours. Cormesh's crystalline features seemed to brighten slightly. Then, perhaps you should reconsider your priorities, Captain. The station's biological containment facility is quite humane. Your pet will be well cared for. The way he said pet made Sarah's blood boil. She looked down at Max, who was sitting calmly beside her, completely unaware of the bureaucratic storm swirling around him. His brown eyes looked up at her with absolute trust. Fine, she said through gritted teeth. But I want to inspect the facility first, and I want daily reports on his condition. Of course, Cormesh agreed. Officer Zekta will escort you to the containment facility once we've completed our cargo inspection. The next hour passed in tense silence as the station officials went through the ship's cargo hold with methodical precision. Sarah watched them work while keeping one hand on Max's head, dreading what was to come. The biological containment facility was located in the lower levels of Helios 7, far from the main commercial areas. As they rode the transport tube down, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was making a terrible mistake. The facility itself was sterile and cold, with rows of transparent containment cells lining the walls. This one, Officer Zekta indicated a cell barely large enough for Max to lie down comfortably. Automated feeding and waste disposal systems. Environmental controls maintain optimal atmospheric conditions. Sarah knelt down beside Max, wrapping her arms around his neck. I'll be back for you in 2 days, boy. I promise. Max licked her face and wagged his tail, still trusting despite the strange surroundings. As the containment field activated, separating them with a shimmering barrier of energy, Sarah felt like she was abandoning her best friend. Back on the ship, the crew could sense their captain's mood. Work proceeded efficiently, but quietly as they supervised the loading of agricultural supplies and coordinated repairs with station technicians. Sarah threw herself into the logistics, trying to distract herself from thoughts of Max alone in that sterile cell. Captain Jen Martinez, her human chief engineer, approached her in the cargo bay. The hyperdrive repairs are going faster than expected. We could be ready to depart by tomorrow evening. Good, Sarah replied curtly. The sooner we're off this station, the better. That evening, Sarah made her way back to the containment facility. The lower levels of Helios 7 were dimly lit during the night cycle, and she encountered few other beings in the corridors. The facility guard, a bored-looking Tentari, barely acknowledged her presence as she checked on Max. Her heart sank when she saw him. Max was lying in the corner of his cell, barely moving. His usual energetic demeanor had been replaced by listless depression. When he saw her, his tail gave a weak wag, but he didn't get up. What's wrong with him? Sarah demanded, turning to the facility's supervisor who had appeared behind her. The supervisor, another crystalline being similar to Cormesh, consulted a data tablet. All biological functions are within normal parameters. The subject is experiencing no physical distress. He's not a subject, he's my dog. And he's clearly not okay. Emotional responses in lower life forms are outside our area of concern. The supervisor replied dismissively. The containment protocols are being followed precisely. Sarah pressed her palm against the energy barrier, and Max slowly got to his feet, pressing his nose against the field from the other side. The sight nearly broke her heart. 24 more hours, she whispered to him. Just hang in there. As she walked back to her ship, Sarah's comm unit chimed with an incoming message. The sender was listed as unknown, but the text made her blood run cold. Your animal's quarantine period has been extended indefinitely pending further biological assessment. Station Administrator Vakhtar wishes to meet with you tomorrow at 0800 hours. Compliance is not optional. Sarah stared at the message, reading it 3 times before the full implication sank in. They were going to keep Max indefinitely. The realization hit her like a physical blow, and for a moment she had to steady herself against the corridor wall. The Stellar Wanderer's bridge was quiet when she returned, most of the crew having retired for the night. Only Vextar remained on duty, monitoring the repair progress. "Captain," he said, noticing her expression, "you appear distressed." Sarah showed him the message. The Zilithian's compound eyes studied the text carefully before looking back at her. "This is unexpected," he said slowly. "Station protocols typically do not change without significant cause." "They're playing games with me," Sarah said, sinking into her command chair. "They know how much Max means to me, and they're using him as leverage for something." "What will you do?" Sarah stared out the viewport at the vast expanse of space beyond the station. Somewhere out there were the Centauri colonies, expecting their cargo shipment. Her crew depended on her to make the difficult decisions that kept them employed and alive. But Max also depended on her, and she'd made him a promise. "I'm going to that meeting tomorrow," she said finally, "and I'm going to find out exactly what they want." The next morning arrived with artificial sunlight flooding the commercial sectors of Helios 7. Sarah dressed carefully in her formal captain's uniform, complete with rank insignia and service decorations. If this was going to be a confrontation, she wanted to look the part. Station Administrator Vakhtar's office was located in the administrative tower, overlooking the main docking bays. The being himself was a Korthak, but unlike the typical engineers of his species, Vakhtar had an air of political sophistication about him. His chitinous carapace was polished to a high sheen, and his movements were deliberate and calculated. "Captain Chun," he greeted her with what might have passed for a smile among his species. "Please sit. I trust you're finding our facilities adequate for your needs." "Cut the pleasantries," Sarah replied, remaining standing. "What do you want?" Vakhtar's mandibles clicked in what she recognized as amusement. "Direct. I appreciate that quality in humans." "Very well. Your cargo manifest indicates you're carrying Terran rare earth metals, specifically refined rhodium and platinum group elements." "That's correct. All legally acquired and properly documented." "Indeed. However, my sources indicate that your shipment contains more than the standard industrial grades. Orbital Defense Command has been tracking shipments of military-grade rare earth metals, particularly those suitable for advanced weapon systems manufacturing." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The cargo they were carrying was exactly that, high-purity materials bound for the Centauri Defense Consortium. But the shipment was legal, covered by proper military transport authorizations. "Our cargo is legitimate military transport," she said carefully. "All proper authorizations are on file with the Commerce Guild." "Authorizations can be forged," Vakhtar replied smoothly. "And given the current tensions between various human factions, the Station Security Council has decided to detain your shipment pending verification with Earth authorities." "How long will that take?" "Communications with Sol System take approximately 3 weeks each way. Add processing time, perhaps 2 months." 2 months. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. The Centauri colonies were expecting their shipment within the week. The delivery contract contained severe penalty clauses for delays. Her crew couldn't afford to sit idle for 2 months, and the Stellar Wanderer had other commitments to honor. "And my dog?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Biological quarantine protocols must be maintained throughout the investigation period. We cannot risk contamination of the station's ecosystem." Sarah studied the Korthak administrator's expression, looking for any sign of compromise. She found none. This was clearly a shakedown operation, but she needed to understand what he really wanted. "What would it take to expedite this process?" she asked. Vakhtar's mandibles clicked again. "A reasonable question. The station operates on limited budgets, and thorough investigations require additional resources. A consultation fee of 50,000 credits might encourage our staff to work with greater efficiency." 50,000 credits. Half of their profit margin on this cargo run. Sarah's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "And if I refuse? Then you're free to leave at any time. Of course, your cargo and the quarantined animal would need to remain until the investigation concludes." The trap was perfect. They couldn't leave without their cargo, couldn't afford the delay, and couldn't abandon Max. Sarah realized that Vaktar had probably been planning this shakedown from the moment they docked. "I need time to consider my options," she said. "Of course. But I should mention that our investigation team works standard shifts. Any delays in reaching an agreement might extend their timeline significantly." Sarah left the administrator's office with her mind racing. She had less than 24 hours before their scheduled departure time, and every hour of delay would cost the money they couldn't afford to lose. But the thought of paying extortion money made her sick, and the idea of leaving Max in that sterile cell for 2 months was unbearable. As she walked through the station's commercial district, Sarah noticed things she'd missed before. The way certain species seemed to cluster together in groups, the subtle signs of tension between different factions. Helios 7 wasn't the neutral trading post it appeared to be. It was a den of corruption and petty politics. Her comm unit chimed with a message from Jen Martinez. "Hyperdrive repairs complete. We can depart whenever you're ready." Sarah stared at the message, knowing she was running out of time. Whatever decision she made in the next few hours would determine not only her crew's future, but Max's fate as well. And deep in her gut, she knew that paying Vaktar's extortion was only the beginning. Once word spread that humans could be shaken down, every petty official in this sector of space would be looking for their piece of the action. The thought filled her with a cold fury that surprised her with its intensity. Sarah Chun had always considered herself a reasonable person, willing to work within the system to solve problems. But as she stood in the middle of Helios 7's main concourse, surrounded by the beings who were holding her best friend hostage for profit, she realized that reason might not be enough this time. Some lines, once crossed, demanded a response that went beyond negotiation and compromise. And they had definitely crossed one of those lines when they touched her dog. Sarah returned to the Stellar Wanderer to find her crew waiting in the common area, their expressions ranging from concern to openly hostile. Word had apparently spread about the extended quarantine and cargo investigation. "Captain," Chief Engineer Martinez stood up as Sarah entered. "We need to talk. The crew's getting nervous about these delays." "I know," Sarah replied, settling into a chair at the central table. "Gather everyone. They deserve to know what we're dealing with." Within minutes, the entire crew had assembled. Sarah looked around at the faces she'd come to trust over the past 2 years. Humans, aliens, all of them depending on her leadership to navigate this crisis. Station Administrator Vaktar is running a shakedown operation. She began without preamble. "They want 50,000 credits to expedite their investigation of our cargo, and they're holding Max as leverage to ensure compliance." Zikta, the Vrex pilot, hissed softly through her teeth. "Corruption. This explains the unusual scanner sweeps when we docked. 50,000 is half our profit," pointed out Torek, the Korthak engineer. His own species' presence in the administration hadn't gone unnoticed. "My people, they are not all honorable. Some forget the old ways." Vextar's 4 arms gestured in a pattern Sarah recognized as deep thought. There are precedents for such operations. Helios 7 operates under Commerce Guild jurisdiction, but enforcement is selective. "So what are our options?" asked Dr. Rebecca Stone, the ship's medic and xenobiologist. Sarah had been considering exactly that question. "We pay the bribe, lose half our profit, and encourage every corrupt official between here and the Rim to try the same thing. We leave without Max and our cargo, which means we're broke and I've abandoned my dog. Or, Martinez prompted. Or we find another way." The room fell silent. Everyone understood the implications of that statement. In the frontier regions of space, another way often meant violence, and violence had consequences that rippled far beyond a single incident. "Captain," Dr. Stone said carefully, "I understand your attachment to Max. We all do. But risking the entire crew for what?" Sarah's voice had an edge that made several crew members shift uncomfortably. "For dog? Just an animal that serves no functional purpose." She stood up, moving to the viewport that showed Helios 7's docking bay. Let me tell you about Max. 3 years ago, when we first started operating as an independent freighter, we took a contract to Kepler 438b. Routine cargo run, or so we thought. The crew listened intently. They'd heard fragments of this story, but never the complete version. The colony there had been hit by a plague, some kind of engineered virus that targeted human neurochemistry. By the time we arrived, half the colonists were dead or catatonic. The local authorities wanted to quarantine the entire planet, write off 8,000 people as acceptable losses. Sarah turned back to face her crew. Max and I went down to the surface anyway. Dogs, it turns out, can detect chemical changes in human biology that our sensors miss. Max led me to a group of children who had survived by hiding in a cave system. 43 kids, ages 5 to 15, who would have died if we hadn't found them. She paused, letting the weight of that statement settle over the room. Those children are alive today because a functionally useless animal cared enough about human suffering to search for survivors. The youngest girl, Anna Volkov, sent me a video message last month. She's studying xenobiology at Centauri University now, wants to develop better early warning systems for biological threats. Vextar's compound eyes focused on Sarah with new understanding. The dog saved human lives. Max didn't save lives because it was his job or because he expected payment. He did it because that's what pack loyalty means. That's what family means. And right now, my family is locked in a cage by beings who think they can use love as a weapon against us. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Martinez exchanged glances with Dr. Stone, recognizing the dangerous calm in their captain's voice. So here's what's going to happen, Sarah continued. We're going to get Max back, we're going to recover our cargo, and we're going to make sure Vaktar understands that threatening a human's family has consequences. Captain, Torek spoke up. Station security is well armed. They have enforcement agreements with several mercenary groups. Direct confrontation would be suicidal. Sarah finished. Probably. Which is why we're not going to use direct confrontation. She activated the main display screen, showing a schematic of Helios 7's layout. Dr. Stone, how familiar are you with Korthak physiology? Reasonably familiar. Why? Korthaks have highly specialized digestive systems, correct? They can process compounds that would be toxic to most other species. Yes, their chitinous carapaces actually incorporate trace metal from their diet. It's part of their natural armor development. Sarah's smile was predatory. And what happens when those trace metals are deliberately contaminated? Dr. Stone's expression shifted from confusion to alarmed understanding. Captain, you're talking about biological warfare. That's a violation of at least 12 galactic treaties. No, I'm talking about food poisoning. A regrettable accident caused by improperly stored agricultural supplies. Martinez leaned forward. What kind of agricultural supplies? The kind we're scheduled to pick up before departure. Specifically, refined mineral supplements for hydroponic farming systems. Supplements that, if accidentally contaminated with certain industrial compounds, could cause severe digestive distress in Korthak physiology without permanent harm. The room was silent as the implications sank in. Vextar was the first to speak. This would disable station administration temporarily, but security forces include multiple species. The plan is incomplete. You're right, Sarah agreed, which is why we need to be smarter about this. Zikta, how familiar are you with Helios 7's communication systems? The Vrex pilot's reptilian features remained expressionless, but her eyes glittered with interest. Standard guild installation. Quantum entanglement links for long range. Subspace relays for local traffic. All heavily encrypted, but not immune to interference from, say, a badly tuned hyperdrive motivator that's undergone recent repairs. Now Zikta smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Hyperdrive resonance cascade could theoretically disrupt subspace frequencies. Purely accidental, of course. Of course. Jen, how long would it take to introduce harmonic instabilities into our hyperdrive system? Martinez grinned. About 20 minutes, and another 10 to make it look like a genuine malfunction. Dr. Stone, Sarah turned to the medic. I need you to analyze the agricultural supplements we're taking on. Find me something that will make court hacks sick without killing them. Make it look like a natural contamination from improper storage. Sarah, I can't be party to deliberate poisoning. Rebecca, Sarah's use of the doctor's first name carried unusual weight. 43 children. That's how many lives Max helped save on Kepler. 438b. Right now, he's alone and scared in a cage because some corrupt administrator thinks humans won't fight for their family. Dr. Stone looked around the room, seeing the determined faces of her crewmates. If I do this, it's under strict medical supervision. No permanent harm, no lasting effects. Agreed. Torek, I need you to interface with the station's environmental systems. Find me a way to introduce atmospheric contaminants into the administration sector only. The Korthak engineer's mandibles clicked uncertainly. Captain, this violates many protocols. Torek, Sarah's voice softened slightly. Your people have a saying about honor and family bonds, don't they? Something about the strength of the hive protecting the individual. The swarm endures when each protects all, and all protect each, Torek quoted. But, Captain, you are not Korthak. No, I'm human. And humans don't abandon family, no matter what species tries to take them from us. Torek was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I will find a way. Sarah looked around the table one more time. Anyone who wants out, say so now. What we're planning isn't exactly legal, and there will be consequences if we're caught. No one moved to leave. All right, then. We have 18 hours until our scheduled departure. That gives us time to set everything up and execute the plan. But first, I need to pay our friend Vakhtar another visit. An hour later, Sarah stood once again in the administrator's office, this time carrying a credit transfer authorization pad. Captain Shun, Vakhtar greeted her with obvious satisfaction. I trust you've had time to consider our discussion. I have, Sarah replied, holding up the pad. 50,000 credits, as requested. Excellent. I knew humans were reasonable beings. The transfer authorization. Sarah held the pad, just out of his reach. There are conditions. Vakhtar's mandibles stopped clicking. Conditions? I want to see my dog first. Personal inspection to ensure he's being properly cared for. That can be arranged. I also want the biological containment facility's complete maintenance records for the past 6 months. If my dog gets sick because of substandard conditions, the deal is off. The records are confidential. Then, the credits stay with me. Sarah started to pocket the authorization pad. Wait. Vakhtar's tone became conciliatory. The records can be provided. Anything else? One more thing. My cargo inspection needs to be completed before we transfer the credits. I want confirmation that our shipment will be cleared for departure within 12 hours. That may be challenging. Then, you'd better motivate your inspection team. 50,000 credits is a lot of money, Administrator. But it's worthless if you can't deliver what you promised. Vakhtar studied her carefully, looking for signs of deception. Sarah kept her expression neutral, though inside she was fighting a mixture of rage and disgust at having to negotiate with this creature. Very well. The inspection will be completed by tomorrow morning. Your animal can be released as soon as the credit transfer is confirmed. Perfect. Sarah handed over the authorization pad. Pleasure doing business with you. As she left the administrator's office, Sarah activated her comm unit. All teams, this is the captain. Execute Phase 1. Across the station, her crew began implementing their carefully coordinated plan. In the agricultural storage bay, Dr. Stone introduced carefully measured contaminants into the mineral supplements destined for Korthak consumption. The contamination was subtle, trace amounts of industrial compounds that would cause digestive distress, but no lasting harm. Meanwhile, Martinez worked in the Stellar Wanderer's engine room, introducing harmonic instabilities into the hyperdrive motivator. To any external scanner, it would appear as a dangerous malfunction requiring immediate attention. But the reality was more precise. The instabilities would create subspace interference that would disrupt Helios 7's communication systems at a specific frequency range. Zikta coordinated with both efforts, mapping the station's communication network and identifying the optimal timing for maximum disruption. The goal was to create a window of opportunity when station security couldn't coordinate effectively or call for reinforcements. Torek proved to be the most valuable asset in the operation. His knowledge of Korthak engineering allowed him to access the station's environmental systems through maintenance interfaces that other species couldn't effectively use. He programmed a cascade failure that would flood the administration sector with harmless but irritating atmospheric compounds, specifically elevated levels of nitrogen and trace amounts of xenon gas that would cause disorientation in Korthak physiology. Captain, Vextar's voice came through her comm unit as she made her way back to the docking bay. Phase 1 is complete. All systems are in place, awaiting your signal. Understood. Begin monitoring station security protocols. I want to know the moment anything changes. The next 12 hours passed, intense preparation. Sarah made her promised visit to the biological containment facility, where she found Max looking slightly better than before, but still clearly depressed. The sight of him in that sterile cell reinforced her determination to see the plan through. Tomorrow morning, boy, she whispered against the energy barrier. I promise. As the station's day cycle shifted toward evening, the first phase of their plan began to take effect. The contaminated mineral supplements had been distributed through the station's food service network, and several Korthak personnel began reporting mild illness. Nothing serious enough to warrant medical emergency, but sufficient to reduce staffing in key departments. Captain, Dr. Stone's voice was tight with concern as she reported from the medical bay. I'm monitoring the contamination effects. 3 Korthaks in administration are showing symptoms, including Administrator Vokhtar. They'll be incapacitated for several hours, but should recover fully. Any other species affected? Negative. The contamination is specifically designed to target Korthak digestive chemistry. Excellent. Jen, are you ready with a hyperdrive malfunction? Standing by. On your word. I can create enough subspace interference to knock out their communication grid for approximately 30 minutes. Torek, environmental systems? Atmospheric contamination is prepared. Administration sector will be uninhabitable for Korthaks within 5 minutes of activation. Sarah looked around the bridge at her assembled crew. In a few minutes, they would be committed to a course of action that could result in criminal charges, imprisonment, or worse. But the alternative, abandoning Max and submitting to extortion, was unacceptable. All teams, execute Phase 2 in 60 seconds. Zikta, plot an emergency departure course. We'll have one shot at this. As the final seconds counted down, Sarah thought about Anna Volkov and the 42 other children who owed their lives to a dog's loyalty. She thought about every corrupt official in this sector of space who preyed on travelers and traders, using bureaucracy as a weapon against those who couldn't fight back. But mostly, she thought about Max, alone in that cage, trusting that she would keep her promise to bring him home. Execute, she said quietly. Across Helios 7, the carefully orchestrated chaos began. The first sign that something was wrong came from the administration sector, where Vokhtar was in the middle of reviewing Sarah's credit transfer when his digestive system rebelled with violent efficiency. Within minutes, 3 other Korthak officials were experiencing similar symptoms, their chitinous carapaces turning an alarming shade of green as their specialized metabolism struggled to process the contaminated minerals. Emergency medical teams rushed to respond, but their efforts were hampered when Torek's environmental sabotage triggered atmospheric alerts throughout the administrative tower. Nitrogen levels spiked to uncomfortable levels, while trace amounts of xenon gas created a disorienting fog that made it difficult for Korthak personnel to coordinate effectively. Then, Martinez triggered the hyperdrive malfunction. The Stellar Wanderer's engines screamed to life with a harmonic resonance that should have been impossible. Instead of generating thrust, the carefully tuned instabilities created a subspace interference pattern that rippled outward from their docking bay like a stone thrown into still water. Helios 7's communication grid went dark in seconds. All systems green. Martinez reported from the engine room, her voice tight with concentration. Interference pattern is holding steady. We've got maybe 25 minutes before someone figures out how to compensate. Sarah activated her comm unit, switching to emergency frequencies that wouldn't be affected by the subspace interference. All teams, we're go for Phase 3. Torek, I need you in the biological containment facility. Zikta, monitor station security responses. Dr. Stone, coordinate with me on cargo recovery. The corridors of Helios 7 were in chaos as the crew of the Stellar Wanderer moved with practiced efficiency through the confusion. Emergency lighting had activated throughout the station, and automated systems were struggling to cope with multiple simultaneous failures. Sarah and Dr. Stone made their way toward the cargo bays, where their shipment of rare earth metals was being held under investigation. The security checkpoint that normally would have stopped them was unmanned. The guards had been called away to deal with a medical emergency in the administration sector. This feels too easy, Dr. Stone muttered as they approached the sealed storage unit containing their cargo. It's not easy, Sarah replied, working quickly to override the security locks with codes that Torek had provided. It's just that most beings don't expect anyone to be crazy enough to assault an entire space station for a dog. The cargo bay doors slid open, revealing their shipment of refined metals exactly as they had left it. Dr. Stone began attaching anti-gravity sleds to the storage containers while Sarah kept watch for security patrols. Captain, Vexstar's voice crackled through her comm unit. Station security is attempting to coordinate a response, but communication failures are hampering their efforts. However, I'm detecting movement toward the biological containment facility. Understood. Torek, what's your status? Torek's voice was strained as he replied from the lower levels of the station. I have reached the facility, but there are complications. The energy barriers around the containment cells are protected by independent power systems. I cannot disable them remotely. Sarah's blood ran cold. She had planned for many contingencies, but not for the possibility that they wouldn't be able to free Max from his cell. Can you override them manually? Negative. The control systems require administrator-level authorization codes, which we don't have, Dr. Stone said, immediately understanding the problem. Sarah's mind raced through alternatives. They could try to force their way into the facility, but that would involve direct violence against station personnel. They could attempt to steal the authorization codes, but that would take time they didn't have. Or, Torek, can you access the facility's life support systems? Affirmative. Why? How long would it take to create an emergency evacuation scenario that would automatically open all containment cells? There was a pause as the Korthak engineer considered the implications. Such systems exist for fire suppression and atmospheric emergencies. If I trigger a controlled decompression alert, do it. Captain, that will endanger other beings in the facility. Only if they don't evacuate as they're supposed to. Trigger the alert. Give everyone 90 seconds to clear out. Then, execute the emergency protocol. As Torek worked to implement the plan, Sarah and Dr. Stone finished loading their cargo onto transport sleds. The rare earth metals represented months of work and their crew's entire profit margin for this quarter. Losing them to Vakhtar's extortion scheme would have been catastrophic. Cargo secured, Dr. Stone reported. But we've got company. Sarah looked up to see a security patrol approaching the cargo bay, 2 Brutic enforcers and a Nexury officer, all armed with neural disruptors and looking distinctly unfriendly. Station security, the lead Brutic shouted. Stand down and prepare for detention. Dr. Stone, get the cargo back to the ship, Sarah ordered quietly. I'll handle this. Sarah, that's an order. Dr. Stone reluctantly activated the transport sleds and began guiding them toward the docking bay while Sarah stepped forward to face the security patrol. Officers, she said calmly, there seems to be some confusion. I'm Captain Sarah Chun of the merchant vessel Stellar Wanderer. We're simply retrieving our legally owned cargo. Your cargo is under investigation for treaty violations, the Nexury officer replied, her mechanical voice cutting through the background noise of emergency alarms. Return to your ship immediately or face criminal charges. I'm afraid I can't do that. You see, your administrator and I have an agreement. 50,000 credits in exchange for the release of our cargo and my quarantined animal. Sarah held up her credit authorization pad, showing the completed transaction. The security officers exchanged uncertain glances. Without communication access, they couldn't verify the claim with their supervisors. Authorization codes are required for cargo release, the lead Brutix said, but his tone was less certain than before. Check your emergency protocols, Sarah suggested. I believe you'll find that during station-wide emergencies, certain detention procedures are automatically suspended. It was a bluff, but a calculated one. Most space stations had emergency protocols that prioritized life safety over property security during crisis situations. The security officers couldn't verify the claim without communication access, and the multiple simultaneous emergencies throughout Helios 7 certainly qualified as a station-wide crisis. Torek, she said quietly into her comm unit, status report. Emergency decompression alert has been triggered. Facility evacuation is in progress. Containment cell releases will activate in 30 seconds. The security patrol was still trying to decide how to handle the situation when alarms began blaring throughout the biological containment facility. Emergency lighting strobed in the distinctive pattern that indicated atmospheric hazard, and automated announcements echoed through the corridors. All personnel evacuate biological containment immediately. Emergency decompression protocols activated. All containment subjects will be released for safety evacuation. That's my cue, Sarah said to the security officers. If you'll excuse me, I need to collect my dog. She walked away from the confused patrol, leaving them to figure out their priorities. Behind her, Dr. Stone was successfully maneuvering their cargo toward the docking bay, where Martinez and the rest of the crew were preparing for emergency departure. The biological containment facility was in controlled chaos when Sarah arrived. Automated systems had indeed released all the energy barriers, and various quarantine specimens were being corralled by facility staff wearing emergency breathing apparatus. Most of the detained creatures were harmless. Exotic plants, small animals, biological samples awaiting processing. And Max, Sarah spotted him immediately, standing uncertainly in the corridor outside his former cell. The golden retriever looked confused, but alert, his head turning as he tried to process the cacophony of alarms and shouting voices. Max! Sarah called out. His head snapped around at the sound of her voice, and his entire body language transformed. Tail wagging furiously, he bounded toward her with all the enthusiasm she remembered. Sarah dropped to her knees as he crashed into her, nearly bowling her over with his excited greeting. Good boy, she whispered, wrapping her arms around him. I told you I'd come back. Captain Chun. Sarah looked up to see Torek approaching, his chitinous features reflecting the emergency lighting. Facility evacuation is complete, he reported. However, security forces are converging on this location. We must depart immediately. Agreed. Let's get out of here. The trio made their way quickly through the corridors of Helios 7, with Max trotting happily beside Sarah as if they were simply taking an evening stroll. The station's emergency systems were still struggling to cope with multiple simultaneous failures, and most of the personnel they encountered were too busy dealing with their own crises to pay attention to one human and her dog. They reached the docking bay to find the Stellar Wanderer fully loaded and ready for departure. Martinez had managed to convince the automated docking systems that their emergency departure was necessary for engine safety. The ongoing hyperdrive malfunction made their ship appear to be a potential hazard to the station. All aboard, Sarah called out as they reached the airlock. Zikta, are we clear for departure? Departure corridor is open, the Vrex pilot replied. However, station control is attempting to override our flight authorization. Too bad they can't reach us through all this subspace interference, Sarah said innocently. Martinez, Can you shut down the hyperdrive malfunction once we're clear of the station? Absolutely. The interference will dissipate within minutes of our departure. As the stellar wanderer disengaged from its berth and moved toward open space, Sarah stood on the bridge watching Helios 7 recede behind them. Max lay contentedly at her feet, apparently none the worse for his ordeal. Around her, the crew worked with quiet efficiency to put distance between their ship and the station. Captain, Vextar said quietly, long-range sensors indicate multiple ships moving toward Helios 7. It appears word of the emergency has reached nearby systems. How long before station communications are restored? Based on our departure trajectory and the interference pattern decay rate, approximately 6 minutes. Sarah nodded. 6 minutes before Vextar and his security forces could call for help or coordinate pursuit. 6 minutes before the full scope of what they had done became clear to station authorities. Zikta, what's our best speed to the hyperspace jump point? At maximum sublight acceleration, 17 minutes. 17 minutes to reach the safety of hyperspace. 11 minutes after Helios 7 regained communications. Sarah tried to calculate the odds of pursuit ships being able to intercept them before they jumped, but the mathematics were complex and dependent on too many variables. Captain, Dr. Stone approached with a medical scanner in her hands. I'd like to check Max's condition. Who knows what they might have done to him during quarantine? Sarah nodded, watching as the doctor ran her scanner over Max's relaxed form. The golden retriever submitted to the examination with patient tolerance, occasionally licking Dr. Stone's hand when she paused her work. Physically, he appears fine, Dr. Stone reported after several minutes. Slightly underweight, elevated stress hormones, but nothing that won't resolve with proper care. However, I'm detecting trace amounts of Korthak pheromones in his fur. They've been using him for behavioral studies. Sarah's jaw tightened. What kind of studies? Hard to say without more detailed analysis. But the pheromone concentrations suggest prolonged exposure to stress-inducing stimuli. They may have been deliberately frightening him to study his responses. The temperature on the bridge seemed to drop several degrees. Sarah's hands slowly clenched into fists as the implications sank in. Are you saying they were torturing my dog for research purposes? The evidence suggests systematic psychological stress testing, yes. Around the bridge, the crew members exchanged worried glances. They had seen their captain angry before, but this was something different. This was the kind of cold fury that made rational people do irrational things. Captain, Martinez said carefully from the engineering station, we're approaching the hyperspace jump point. Course plot is locked in for the Centauri system. Delay that jump, Sarah said quietly. Captain, I said delay the jump. Zikta, turn us around. Sarah, Dr. Stone said urgently, what are you thinking? Sarah looked down at Max, who was watching her with those trusting brown eyes that had seen too much fear over the past 2 days. Then, she looked around at her crew, beings from half a dozen different species who had risked everything to help her save one small animal. I'm thinking that what we did back there was just the beginning, she said. We recovered our cargo, rescued Max, and showed them that humans don't back down when their family is threatened. But we didn't really solve the problem. The problem? Vextar asked. Vextar and his corruption ring are still operating, still shaking down other ships, still exploiting travelers who don't have the resources or the crew to fight back. And now we know they're conducting illegal biological experiments on quarantined animals. Sarah stood up, moving to the main display screen. With a few keystrokes, she brought up Helios 7's schematic, highlighting the various systems they had compromised during their escape. What we did today was defensive. We protected ourselves and recovered our property. But that's not enough. Not when they were torturing Max for their sick research projects. Not when they're probably doing the same thing to other creatures right now. Captain, Orcs said slowly, are you suggesting we return to the station? I'm suggesting we finish what we started. Helios 7 is a hub for illegal activities disguised as legitimate commerce. Their quarantine facilities are being used for unauthorized biological research. Their administration is corrupt from top to bottom. She turned to face her crew, and in her expression, they saw something that made them understand why humans had earned such a dangerous reputation among the galaxy's predatory species. Vaktar thinks he can use fear and bureaucracy to prey on innocent travelers. He thinks that because we're just a small merchant crew, we'll take our losses and move on. He's about to learn that humans have a very different definition of acceptable losses. The bridge was silent except for the soft humming of ship systems and Max's contented breathing. Finally, Martinez spoke up. "What do you need us to do, Captain?" The plan Sarah outlined over the next hour was audacious beyond anything her crew had imagined. Where their first operation had been surgical and defensive, this was comprehensive and devastating. She intended to expose the entire corruption network operating out of Helios 7 and ensure that Vaktar's organization never threatened another innocent traveler. The station's main computer core is located in the security sector, Sarah explained, highlighting the target on their tactical display. It contains records of every investigation they've conducted, every bribe they've collected, every illegal experiment they've performed in that biological facility. Dr. Stone leaned forward. "You want to steal their entire database? I want to copy it and broadcast it to every news network, law enforcement agency, and Commerce Guild office in this sector. Let the galaxy see exactly what kind of operation Vaktar is running." Zikta's reptilian features showed unusual emotion. Such evidence would destroy their organization, but the security around the computer core will be extensive. "Which is why we're not going to break in," Sarah replied. "We're going to be invited in." She activated a secondary display showing communication logs from their previous visit to Helios 7. "Vaktar accepted our credit transfer for 50,000 credits. According to galactic commerce law, that constitutes a binding contract for services rendered. He failed to deliver those services. Our cargo was never cleared, and Max was subjected to unauthorized experimentation." Martinez grinned as she understood the implications. "Contract violation. We have legal grounds to demand arbitration and full access to their records to document our damages." "Exactly. And while we're conducting our legal investigation, we'll be copying everything they have." Torek's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "The plan has merit, but station security will be on high alert after our previous activities." "True, but they'll also be dealing with multiple ongoing crises. The atmospheric contamination in the administration sector will take hours to fully clear. Half their communications grid is still damaged from our hyperdrive interference, and several key personnel are still recovering from their mysterious illness." Sarah looked around at her crew, seeing mixture of determination and concern on their faces. "I won't lie to you. This is dangerous. If we're caught, we'll face charges that could put us in prison for years. But if we do nothing, Vaktar will continue preying on innocent beings, and other creatures will suffer the same torture that Max endured." "How do we get back on a station?" asked Dr. Stone. "They'll be watching for us." "We don't all go back. Just me and whoever volunteers for the mission. The rest of the crew takes the ship to a safe distance and waits for our signal." Vextar raised one of his four hands. "Captain, logical analysis suggests this plan has a low probability of success. Station security will be expecting retaliation. They'll be expecting more sabotage," Sarah corrected. "They won't be expecting a legal challenge backed by Commerce Guild regulations. Sometimes the best way to hide is in plain sight." 2 hours later, the Stellar Wanderer was once again approaching Helios 7, but this time under different circumstances. Sarah had filed formal complaints with the Commerce Guild, the Biological Research Ethics Board, and 3 different law enforcement agencies. Her legal standing was technically sound. Vaktar had indeed violated their contract and failed to provide the services he'd promised. Helios 7 Control. This is the merchant vessel Stellar Wanderer requesting permission to dock. Zikta, transmitted on standard frequencies. We have legal authorization to conduct damage assessment and evidence-gathering procedures. The response was immediate and hostile. Asterisk Stellar Wanderer asterisk. You are ordered to maintain distance from this station. Any attempt to dock will be met with force. Please check your legal databases, Sarah replied, taking over the communication. Commerce Guild Regulation 2847 grants merchants the right to investigate contract violations. Our authorization codes are being transmitted now. There was a long pause before Helios 7 Control responded. Stand by for legal verification. Sarah exchanged glances with Torek, who had volunteered to accompany her back to the station. The Korthak engineer's knowledge of the station's systems would be invaluable, and his species' reputation for technical expertise would provide cover for their true mission. Captain Dr. Stone's voice came through the comm from the ship's medical bay. I've completed my analysis of the pheromone traces on Max. The patterns are consistent with systematic fear conditioning. They were deliberately terrifying him to study his stress responses. The confirmation of Max's torture sent a fresh wave of anger through Sarah, but she forced herself to remain calm. Anger would make her sloppy, and she needed to be precise for what came next. Understood, Doctor. Make sure your findings are included in our legal filing. Asterisk Stellar Wanderer asterisk. You are cleared for docking at Bay 7, came the grudging response from Station Control. Be advised that security escorts will be provided for your investigation. Acknowledged. We appreciate your cooperation. As their shuttle approached Helios 7's secondary docking bay, Sarah reviewed the plan one final time. They would conduct a legitimate legal investigation, documenting evidence of contract violation and illegal experimentation. But they would also use their access to the station's computer systems to copy the complete database of Vaktar's corrupt activities. The success of their mission depended on walking the fine line between legal investigation and industrial espionage. If they were caught accessing unauthorized data, their legal protection would evaporate, and they'd face serious criminal charges. Station security is extensive, Torek observed as they docked. Multiple species, heavy armament, advanced surveillance systems. Good, Sarah replied. The more security they have, the more they have to hide. They were met at the airlock by a security team led by Commander Jexer, a Tentari officer whose tentacled features showed obvious irritation. Behind him stood 2 Brutic enforcers and a Nexery surveillance specialist. Captain Chun, Jexer's voice carried the distinctive whistling undertones of a species. I trust you understand that your presence here is barely tolerated. Any deviation from approved investigation protocols will result in immediate detention. Of course, Sarah replied pleasantly. We're simply here to document the damages from your administrator's contract violations. Standard commercial law. Your pet caused significant disruption to our biological containment facility. My dog was illegally subjected to psychological torture in violation of at least 6 galactic treaties. I think you'll find that our legal position is quite strong. Commander Jexer's tentacles writhed with barely contained anger, but he couldn't dispute the legal facts. Vaktar's organization had indeed violated multiple laws, and Sarah's complaint had been filed through proper channels. Where do you wish to begin your investigation? The biological containment facility, followed by the administration sector, where our contract was negotiated. We'll need access to relevant computer records to document our damages. Computer access will be supervised and limited to pertinent files only. Naturally, we wouldn't want to access anything outside the scope of our investigation. The next 3 hours were a delicate dance of legal procedure and covert intelligence gathering. Sarah and Torek systematically documented every violation they could find, evidence of Max's mistreatment, records of the fraudulent cargo investigation, proof of Vaktar's extortion demands. But while they conducted their official investigation, Torek was also accessing the station's computer network through maintenance interfaces that most beings couldn't even see. His species' natural ability to interface with complex technical systems allowed him to navigate Helios 7 security protocols without triggering obvious alarms. The database is extensive, Torek whispered during a moment when their security escorts were distracted by a minor emergency in another sector. Records of hundreds of fraudulent investigations, illegal biological experiments, extortion payments from dozens of merchant vessels. How much can you copy? All of it, but it will take time. The data volumes are enormous. We have time. They can't rush a legal investigation without appearing to obstruct justice. While Torek worked on the data extraction, Sarah continued building their legal case. The evidence of corruption was overwhelming. Payment records that clearly showed bribes disguised as processing fees, biological research logs that violated every ethical standard in the galaxy, communication records that proved systematic extortion of merchant vessels. But it was the personal logs that truly revealed the scope of Vakhtar's operation. The Korthak administrator had been careful to maintain detailed records of every illegal activity, apparently believing that his position protected him from investigation. The logs revealed a network of corrupt officials extending throughout this sector of space, with Helios 7 serving as the central hub for their activities. Captain Commander Jexer approached as they worked in the Administration Sector Computer Center. You've been conducting this investigation for 3 hours. How much longer do you require? We're documenting systematic violations spanning several years, Sarah replied, without looking up from her datapad. Commercial law requires thorough documentation to support damage claims. I'm sure you understand. The Tentari officer's tentacles twitched with frustration, but he couldn't argue with her legal authority. The Commerce Guild took contract violations seriously, and any attempt to obstruct a legitimate investigation would only strengthen Sarah's case. Data extraction complete, Torek announced quietly. I have copied their entire database, including encrypted files and deleted records. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction. They now possessed evidence that could destroy Vakhtar's entire operation and expose the corruption network that had been preying on innocent travelers for years. Excellent. Time to finish our legal documentation and get out of here. But as they prepared to conclude their investigation, alarms began blaring throughout the administration sector. Emergency lights strobed in the distinctive pattern that indicated security breach, and automated announcements echoed through the corridors. Unauthorized data access detected. All personnel report to security stations immediately. Station lockdown protocols are now in effect. Commander Jexer's expression shifted from frustration to suspicion as he looked at Sarah and Torek. Captain Chun, I think you and your engineer need to answer some questions. About what? Sarah asked innocently. We've been conducting our legal investigation under your direct supervision. Station security systems indicate massive data transfers from the computer core. The timing corresponds exactly with your presence here. Sarah's mind raced through their options. They had the evidence they needed, but they were now trapped on a hostile station with security forces closing in. The legal protections that had gotten them this far were about to evaporate. Commander, she said calmly, I think you'll find that our legal investigation has revealed some very interesting information about this station's activities. Perhaps we should contact the Commerce Guild directly to discuss our findings. The station is under lockdown. No communications in or out until this security breach is resolved. Behind Commander Jexer, the Brutic enforcers were moving to blocking positions, while the Nexery specialist began scanning them with detection equipment. Sarah realized that their situation had just gone from risky to potentially fatal. Torek, she said quietly, please tell me you have one more engineering trick up your sleeve. The Korthak engineer's mandibles clicked in what she had learned to recognize as grim amusement. Actually, Captain, I do. But you may not like it. At this point, I'll take any suggestions. The station's reactor core is operating beyond safe parameters due to the multiple system failures we caused earlier. A cascading overload is possible, but it would require someone to manually trigger an emergency shutdown from the reactor control room. Sarah understood the implications immediately. How long would that give us? Emergency shutdown protocols would require complete station evacuation. All personnel would need to evacuate to minimum safe distance, approximately 1 hour. And the station? would be uninhabitable for several days while systems are reset and safety checks completed. It was a drastic solution that would effectively shut down Helios 7 for nearly a week, but it would also ensure that no one could cover up the evidence they had gathered. More importantly, it would give them time to escape and transmit their findings to the appropriate authorities. Do it, Sarah decided. As Torek began accessing the reactor control systems through his portable interface, Commander Jexer stepped closer with obvious menace. Captain Shun, you will surrender all data storage devices immediately and submit to detention pending investigation. I'm afraid that's not possible, Sarah replied. You see, we've just discovered that your station's reactor is experiencing a critical malfunction. As a licensed merchant captain, I'm legally obligated to report safety hazards to the appropriate authorities. What reactor malfunction? As if in answer to his question, new alarms began blaring throughout the station, this time with the urgent, penetrating tone that indicated reactor emergency. Emergency lighting shifted to the red warning color that signaled immediate evacuation protocols. That one, Sarah said calmly. Commander Jexer's comm unit erupted with panicked reports from the engineering sector. The reactor control room was reporting cascading failures in multiple systems, with automatic safety protocols recommending immediate station evacuation. This is sabotage, he accused, but his attention was already being pulled away by the emergency. This is a safety hazard that we're reporting through proper channels, Sarah corrected. I suggest you focus on evacuating your personnel rather than harassing legitimate investigators. The next 20 minutes were controlled chaos as Helios 7's evacuation procedures swung into action. Thousands of beings began moving toward evacuation ships and emergency shelters, while automated systems shut down non-essential functions throughout the station. In the confusion, Sarah and Torek made their way back to their shuttle, carrying data storage devices containing enough evidence to destroy Vaktar's entire criminal network. Commander Jexer was too busy coordinating the evacuation to stop them, and by the time he realized they were gone, their shuttle was already departing for the minimum safe distance. Stellar Wanderer *, this is the captain, Sarah transmitted as they cleared the station's immediate vicinity. Mission accomplished. We have everything we need. Understood, Captain, came Zikta's reply. Plotting course for hyperspace jump. Are we ready to depart the system? Sarah looked back at Helios 7, where thousands of beings were evacuating in response to the reactor emergency that Torek had carefully orchestrated. The station would be uninhabitable for days, giving them plenty of time to transmit their evidence to law enforcement agencies throughout the galaxy. But, more importantly, Vaktar and his corrupt associates would soon face justice for their crimes. No more innocent travelers would be subjected to their extortion schemes. No more animals would be tortured in their illegal research programs. Yes, she said with satisfaction. We're ready to go home 3 weeks after the Helios 7 incident. Captain Sarachin stood in the cargo bay of the Stellar Wanderer, watching as Centauri Defense Consortium officials inspected their delivery of rare earth metals. Max lay contentedly at her feet, his golden coat gleaming under the bay's work lights, apparently none the worse for his ordeal. The dog had recovered quickly once they'd returned to space, but Sarah hadn't forgotten the fear in his eyes during those dark hours in the biological containment facility. Some violations demanded more than just justice. They required a reckoning that ensured such things never happened again. Captain Shun, Colonel Miranda Torres of the CDC approached with a datapad in her hands. Your delivery is exactly on schedule despite the complications at Helios 7. The Defense Consortium appreciates reliability in our contractors. Just doing our job, Colonel. Though I have to say, this shipment is probably the most expensive cargo we've ever carried. Colonel Torres smiled. Military-grade rare earth metals are always valuable, but I understand there were additional costs involved in ensuring delivery. That was an understatement. The exposure of Vaktar's corruption network had sent shockwaves throughout this sector of space. When Sarah had transmitted the stolen database to law enforcement agencies across 12 systems, the response had been swift and comprehensive. Galactic Commerce Guild investigators had descended on Helios 7 like an avenging swarm, armed with enough evidence to prosecute dozens of corrupt officials. The Biological Research Ethics Board had launched their own investigation into the illegal experimentation programs. Even the Korthak Confederation had sent representatives to investigate the dishonor brought upon their species by Vakhtar's activities. I take it the authorities were thorough in their investigation? Sarah asked. Very thorough. Administrator Vakhtar and 17 of his associates are facing charges that could result in life imprisonment. The entire administrative structure of Helios 7 has been replaced, and new oversight protocols have been implemented throughout the Commerce Guild network. And the biological facility? Colonel Torres's expression darkened. Shut down permanently. The investigators found evidence of experimentation on over 200 different species, most of it completely unauthorized and in violation of basic ethical standards. The creatures that survived have been relocated to proper rehabilitation facilities. Sarah felt a grim satisfaction at the news. Max's suffering had not been in vain if it prevented similar torture of other innocent animals. But she knew the real victory was larger than one corrupt station. They had exposed a systemic problem that had been festering in the shadows of galactic commerce. Captain, Dr. Stone's voice came through the ship's comm system. We've got incoming communication from Earth Defense Command. Priority channel. Sarah frowned. Earth Defense Command didn't usually contact independent merchants directly, especially not on priority channels. I'll take it on the bridge. She made her way to the bridge with Max trotting beside her, wondering what could be important enough to warrant direct contact from Earth's military command. The communication came through on a secure channel, with Admiral Rebecca Nakamura's stern face appearing on the main display. Captain Chun, the Admiral said without preamble, I trust your recent mission to the Centauri system was successful? Yes, Admiral. Cargo delivered on schedule and in full. Good. I'm sure you're wondering why Earth Defense Command is contacting you directly. Admiral Nakamura paused, studying something off-screen before continuing. The exposure of the Helios 7 corruption network has had ramifications beyond what you might expect. Sarah felt a chill of apprehension. What kind of ramifications? Intelligence analysis of the data you recovered has revealed connections between Vakhtar's organization and several hostile alien factions. The corruption network was being used to identify and track military shipments, particularly those containing strategic materials like the cargo you just delivered. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. They were conducting espionage operations. More than that, they were identifying targets for pirate raids and even direct military action. Your shipment to Centauri would have been intercepted by Zilithian raiders if it had followed the original route through Helios 7. Sarah looked around the bridge at her crew, seeing her own shock reflected in their expressions. They had thought they were fighting corruption and animal cruelty, but they had actually uncovered a much larger conspiracy. Admiral, Vextar spoke up from his station. As a Zilithian, I must formally protest any implication that my government was involved in these activities. Your protest is noted, Commander, but the evidence clearly shows that rogue elements within the Zilithian military were using the corruption network to target human shipping. This represents a serious threat to interspecies relations. Admiral Nakamura's attention returned to Sarah. Captain Chun, your actions at Helios 7 have prevented what could have escalated into open warfare. The Commerce Guild estimates that over 200 merchant vessels were compromised by the intelligence leaked through Vakhtar's network. We were just trying to get our dog back, Sarah said, feeling overwhelmed by the scope of what they had inadvertently accomplished. Sometimes the most important victories come from defending what matters most to us personally, the Admiral replied. Your willingness to risk everything for a single animal has probably saved thousands of lives. The communication ended with Admiral Nakamura's promise that Earth Defense Command would be monitoring the situation closely and that the crew of the Stellar Wanderer had earned the gratitude of both Earth and the Centauri colonies. Well, Martinez said into the silence that followed, That's not exactly what I expected when we started this whole mess. None of us expected it, Sarah replied, reaching down to scratch Max's ears. But that's the thing about doing what's right. You never know how far the consequences will ripple. Dr. Stone entered the bridge carrying a data pad with the latest medical reports. Sarah, I've been analyzing the biological data we recovered from Helios 7. The scale of their illegal research program was staggering. They were conducting experiments on sentient species as well as animals. Sentient species? Sarah felt a familiar surge of anger. Psychological conditioning, pain, threshold testing, even some preliminary genetic manipulation attempts. If we hadn't exposed them when we did, it could have escalated to full biological warfare research. The bridge fell silent as the crew absorbed this latest revelation. What had started as a simple rescue mission had evolved into something much larger. They had effectively prevented the development of biological weapons that could have been used against any species in the galaxy. Captain, Zikta spoke from the pilot's station. I'm receiving multiple communications from various news networks. It appears our actions have attracted significant media attention. Sarah groaned. Media attention was the last thing they needed. What kind of attention? Several networks are calling you the hero of Helios 7. There are requests for interviews, documentary proposals, even a few offers for book deals. Absolutely not. We don't need that kind of publicity. But even as she said it, Sarah realized that the story of what they had accomplished was already spreading throughout the galaxy. The tale of a human captain who had taken on an entire corrupt station to save her dog was the kind of story that resonated across species lines. Over the following days, as the Stellar Wanderer made its way back toward Earth, Sarah began to understand the true impact of their actions. Messages poured in from merchant captains throughout the galaxy, thanking them for exposing the corruption that had been plaguing independent traders for years. Animal rights organizations praised their willingness to risk everything for a single creature's welfare. But perhaps the most meaningful communication came from Anna Volkov, the young woman whose life Max had helped save on Kepler 438b 3 years earlier. Captain Chun, Anna's recorded message began, I wanted you to know that Max's courage in saving us children has inspired my entire career in xenobiology. The research I'm conducting now focuses on developing better protocols for animal welfare in space environments. The message continued with details of Anna's work, but Sarah found herself focusing on the young woman's face, bright, determined, full of the kind of hope that came from having been saved when all seemed lost. She's building a better future because Max saved her life, Dr. Stone observed, having watched the message over Sarah's shoulder. And we've hopefully ensured that other animals won't suffer what Max went through, Sarah replied. Sometimes one small act of loyalty creates ripples that last for generations. As they approached Earth's outer system, Sarah made a decision that surprised even herself. She contacted Admiral Nakamura and requested a meeting with Earth Defense Command. I have a proposal, she told the Admiral during their secure communication. The corruption network we exposed to Helios 7 was just one example of the problems facing independent merchants in frontier space. There are thousands of small operators out there who don't have the resources or connections.